I'd like to welcome everyone on the call to this evening's CIPR Agm. And I'm delighted to see such a large turnout. We've got over 100 people registered and attending tonight's call. For those of you who don't know, my name's Steve Shepperson-Smith, and I've had the honour of being the 75th President of the CIPR. So the agenda for today is we've got our guest speaker, Jon Ronson, who you've just heard me speaking to when you've logged in. I'll introduce Jon in a second formally. And then please do stay with us for the formal business of the AGM after Jon speaks. So Jon will be on for about half an hour or so, and then we'll do the AGM after that. While I know that many of you have joined us specifically to see Jon speak, as I said to him before, the AGM is your opportunity to scrutinise the decisions that the board and management are making about spending member money, so your money. So I think it's a really good thing to stay for if you can, please. I welcome member feedback and questions on performance, and so will Rachel Roberts, who's our immediate past president. Rachel Clamp will take over from me as president 2024, and Alastair McCapra, the CIPR CEO, and you'll hear from all of them later in the meeting. If you want to look at the papers for the meeting today, the annual review, all the accounts, there's a link that Ava will post in the chat to the CIPR website, or indeed Google CIPR AGM 2023, which is what I did earlier, and you can get off that link. I'd also like to highlight that we're recording the meeting. If not already, then that's a reminder to Ava to press the recording button now. As a professional association for PR practitioners in the UK, we obviously pride ourselves on a prescient understanding of current affairs. I can't, though, claim to have known anything about the BBC scandal with Hugh Edwards when I agreed to, or I asked for Jon to speak this evening. I say that I don't want to make light of that latest public shaming because by all accounts, that led to the hospitalisation of Hugh Edwards on mental health grounds. And there are a number of other victims who will be suffering today from this story. It is, though, a good example of why Jon's 2015 book, So You've Been Publicly Shamed, is still very relevant in today's society. And so we've asked Jon to speak today about that book and how internet culture has evolved in the past 8 years. And the answer's not much, one might argue, looking at today's headlines. I thoroughly recommend Jon's entire body of work as an author, journalist, documentary filmmaker, cultural commentator, and of course, some might say most importantly, the keyboardist in Frank Sidebottom's band. From the psychopath tests to his TED Talk, which I read today is one of the 25 most popular TED Talks of all time, which is some achievement, to the man who stared at goats. His books can rightly be called seminal and are bestsellers in both the UK, the US, and the 30 other languages into which they've been translated. His podcasts, like The Debutante, The Butterfly Effect, and Things Fall Apart. Jon has also a lot to say about how the way media has both created connections and stoked cultural wars. And if you haven't seen his films, The Men Who Stare at Goats, Frank and Okja, I hope I've pronounced that correctly, then you're in for an absolute treat. I am, as you can probably tell, a huge Jon Ronson fan. And so we'll tell others to let others try and ask questions after Jon speaks, despite having a long list of my own, given this opportunity to speak to him. So with that said, over to you, Jon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve, and hello, everyone. Yeah, I rewrote my talk this morning because of what's happened the last couple of days. I think the last couple of days have, or should have, taught us a bunch of lessons. One being that Twitter is the world's worst information swapping service. It's been this way for 10 years now, but every time we forget. Over and over during the past 10 years, we've destroyed someone, and then 2 days later, we found out that the information was all wrong. And if we had only waited 2 days, we'd have realized that the person wasn't nearly as bad as we thought that they were. But patience is undervalued on Twitter, and it's even considered a weakness, whereas instant judgment is considered a strength. Anyway, I say it's taught us a bunch of lessons, but I doubt it's taught many people any lessons at all. Because what tends to happen when we realize we've shamed somebody inappropriately is we either totally forget about it and then get on with our day, because the snowflake never needs to feel responsible for the avalanche, or else we shame some other inappropriate shamer, slapping shame onto shame like some clumsy decorator covering cracks. Anyway, I'll get back to Hugh Edwards in a minute, but first let me take you back 8 years to the immediate aftermath of So You've Been Publicly Shamed's publication. A few weeks before it came out, my American publisher sent me a box of cookies with a note that read, "Fasten your safety belt, things are going to get rocky." So I emailed him back to ask him what he meant, and he replied that some people were going to hate my book. And I thought, oh, nobody's going to hate it. How could they? I'm right. But he was right. Publishing shamed was like throwing a hand grenade into the world. These things had never been discussed before, and people were using my book as a springboard to discuss them with an incredible intensity. Was Twitter shaming spiraling out of control? What would the ripples of this massive resurgence of public punishments, this new method of dealing with the flaws of our fellow humans be? And everybody had an opinion. It was very noisy. The book was being used by both sides to bludgeon the other side. Although I was writing about the disproportionate punishment of private individuals who had committed minor transgressions, like telling a liberal joke on Twitter that came out badly, for a few years, it was cited every time anyone did anything bad. If a dentist killed a lion, my book was brought into it. I became like a shaming imam, constantly asked to adjudicate on whether this person or that person deserved it. But in retrospect, I understand why. Something new and huge had engulfed society, the democratization of justice. And society was trying to figure out the boundaries. 8 years later, we still are. At the time, people talked mostly about my chapter on the first great Twitter shaming, the night of Justine Sacco. And for anybody who doesn't remember, Justine Sacco was a PR woman with 170 Twitter followers. And when she was flying from New York to London to Cape Town, and when she was at Heathrow, she tweeted what she thought was a liberal joke mocking her own bubble of privilege. But it was a very poorly worded liberal joke. The joke was, going to Africa, hope I don't get AIDS, just kidding, I'm white. Anyway, she tweeted this, got no replies, and she never got any replies for any of her jokes. Got on the plane, fell asleep, woke up 10 hours later. This was the ground zero of public shaming this night on Twitter. She turned on her phone and straight away there was a text from somebody she hadn't spoken to since high school that said, "I am so sorry to see what's happening to you right now." And then another text from her best friend that said, "You need to phone me right now. You are the worldwide #1 trending topic on Twitter." And what happened while she was asleep was that everybody tore her apart, misogynists, through to Donald Trump, through to social justice people, like everyone was united. This was a shaming that everybody could get behind. And the thing that was most hilarious to people was that she was asleep on a plane and oblivious to her destruction. A hashtag started trending, hashtag has Justine landed yet? People were tweeting that they were in bars and they couldn't go home until Justine Sacco landed because they just couldn't wait for her to find out what we all knew, that her life would never be the same again. Somebody even linked to a flight tracker website so everybody could see in real time the moment her plane would land. Anyway, for years after the book came out, people constantly asked me to retell the Justine Sacco story. I felt like the Brothers Grimm sitting by a campfire telling over and over the tale of the woman in peril on the plane. And I told the story viscerally. I wanted people to feel the pain and the anxiety of what she went through, because on social media, we rarely stop to think whether the person we just tore apart was okay or in ruins. And so I wanted to show that the weapon we were wielding was way more powerful than we realized, with way more of a psychological impact on the people that we were punishing, as Hugh Edwards' wife's statement last night testifies to. But as it happens, there's a different chapter in the book that by chance, I think really offered a glimpse into where we are today. It's the story of Max Mosley. Let me quickly tell you Max's story. In 2008, an article appeared on the front page of the News of the World. The headline was F1 boss Max Mosley has thick Nazi orgy with 5 hookers. Formula One motor racing chief Max Mosley is today exposed as a secret sadomasochist sex pervert. The son of infamous British wartime fascist leader Oswald Mosley is filmed romping with 5 hookers at a depraved Nazi-style orgy in a torture dungeon. At first, as Max stood at a newsstand in West London, staring at a picture of himself naked, bent over and spanked by women in German uniform, that line from Othello came into his head. I have lost my reputation. I have lost the immortal part of myself, and what remains is bestial. He took the newspaper home and showed it to his wife. She thought he'd had it specially printed as a joke, and then she realised that it wasn't a joke. And most people in Max Mosley's position go silent and vanish. That's what Hugh Edwards did. But instead, Max did something that almost no shamed people did, especially back then. He went public. He gave an interview to Radio 4 where he said, yes, his sex life was strange, but when it comes to sex, everybody knows that people think and do and say strange things, and only an idiot would think the worse of him for it. If our shameworthiness lies in the space between who we are and how we present ourselves to the world, Max Mosley was narrowing that gap to nothing, which I think is a really interesting thing for PR people to think about. Our shameworthiness lies in the space between who we are and how we present ourselves to the world. The wider the gap, the more shameworthy we are. Also, Max had an ace up his sleeve. The News of the World had made a fateful mistake. The orgy was definitely German-tinged, but it wasn't Nazi-themed. And so he sued, which he could afford to do, of course. He was rich. Most people don't have that luxury. In court, the News of the World journalists were asked to go frame by frame through the video that they had secretly recorded in the dungeon so they could point out the swastikas or any other Nazi paraphernalia. The court transcript is hilarious, with Max's lawyers asking the journalists, this is a quote from the transcript, "That's Mr. Mosley having a cup of tea. Nothing Nazi there?" "Correct," the journalists replied. As Max put it during his cross-examination, if they had wanted to look like Nazis rather than generic German soldiers, quote, "it would have been easy to obtain Nazi uniforms online or from a costumier." Max told me that he was doing it for the dead that preceded him, and he told me a couple of stories to demonstrate. One was about a man named Ben Strong. Max said, quote, "He was an English chef living in northern France, divorced, and he was a swinger. A man and a woman from the News of the World swung by his place. He gave them dinner, disappeared upstairs, and apparently came back down wearing nothing but a pouch." Max paused, then he said, "Pathos." This was June 1992. When Ben Strong discovered that the people looking at him weren't swingers, but News of the World journalists, he started crying. He telephoned the paper's editor, Patsy Chapman. Max said, he said, "Please don't publish, because if you do, I'll never see my children again." Well, they published anyway. They didn't give a damn, so he killed himself. There was another story that Max told me about a Welsh preacher called Arnold Lewis back in 1978. He was trying to organise a swingers party at his caravan somewhere in the woods of Wales, and 5 people showed up, including 2 people from the News of the World. And this orgy, this very kind of half-hearted orgy, happened with the News of the World journalists watching but not joining in. They had sherry and biscuits. Then a couple of days later, the News of the World phoned Arnold Lewis and said, "We're going to publish this story." And he said, "Please don't. If you do, I'll kill myself." And they did. And he killed himself. His body was found in his car. And the headline of the article appeared the same day that his body was found. And the headline was, "If you go down to the woods today, you're sure of a big surprise." Hard not to think of Hugh Edwards and his well-documented history of depression and the tabloid media's just disregard for that kind of thing. Anyway, Max Mosley won his case. He became kind of a hero to shamed people as a standard bearer for our right to feel unashamed, especially when it comes to consensual sex. I wanted him to talk me through how he did it. What was it about his personality that made him ride out his shaming with such little damage to his reputation? Why didn't it break him? One day he emailed me to say that he thought he had the answer. It was simply that he had refused to feel ashamed. He said, as soon as the victim steps out of the pact by refusing to feel ashamed, the whole thing crumbles. I didn't realise back then just how much of a trailblazer he would be regarding his refusal to feel ashamed. Hugh Edwards' response to his shaming is in its way quite old school. When I was writing Shamed, I met lots of people who imploded the way that Hugh Edwards did. People who would read every single tweet written about them and believe every word, every insult. I met people who became depressed and agoraphobic and suicidal. Until it happens to you, you don't realise just how agonising it is. We're social creatures, and it's psychologically mangling to be told you don't belong in the community and you need to get out. But in fact, Max Mosley's very different response, his refusal to be ashamed, has, if anything, become the new norm. Shortly after my book came out, Trump came along. I think his rise to power was in some ways due to the kind of things I covered in Shamed, a response to the overuse of public shaming. Trump realised that if you step out of the pact by refusing to feel ashamed, your critics have nowhere to go except to retreat defeated, which is kind of where we are now. A whole new breed of shame-free transgressors has emerged like hospital superbugs, impervious to treatment. I have very mixed feelings about this. On the one hand, shaming has, these past years, been massively overused, including against people who didn't deserve it. I should say, by the way, that in the 1850s, when public shaming was banned in Britain and America, it was because it was considered to be too brutal. We resurrected around 2012 something that was considered too brutal in the 19th century. So for people like that, people who didn't deserve to be shamed, being able to step out of the pact by refusing to feel ashamed is a godsend. But we don't want a society where people don't feel bad about the bad things they do. People ought to feel some shame if they've done something shameful. It keeps things moral and ordered. Right now, regarding Hugh Edwards, it seems that his transgressions were the type that should have been handled internally by BBC HR and not splashed across every newspaper in Britain, swallowing up the discourse for the better part of a week. But I've noticed that in the anti-shaming world, there can be a somewhat dysfunctional tendency to excuse the crimes of the transgressors because we're so aghast at the nasty and aggressive tactics of the shamers, all of which is causing an escalation in hostilities. Cheered on by the likes of Elon Musk and Joe Rogan, people are affecting ever more extreme personas online, becoming what's known as edgelords. I could give you lots of examples, but here's one. Jordan Peterson. His 2018 book, 12 Rules for Life, was, I thought, very good. One chapter in and I unexpectedly found myself searching for a better pair of shoes than the schlubby crap I usually wear. And I bantered at the expense of my wife with some construction men who were working on our house. It was very unlike me and made me suspect that deep beneath my beta cuck surface is an actual suppressed man. Jordan Peterson attracted millions of fans, lost boys who'd been getting stoned and keeping their rooms untidy. He helped them gain self-respect. And he was vilified for it, rejected from the establishment media, labelled, as the film director Olivia Wilde called him, a hero to incels. When Piers Morgan asked him how he felt about that label, he cried and he said, sure, why not? I thought the marginalised was supposed to have a voice. But after years of intense criticism, something seemed to snap inside Jordan Peterson's brain. He got very sick, ended up in a coma, and emerged as a ferocious culture warrior, yelling like a preacher about his determination to vanquish, quote, woke moralists. He became a caricature of himself, the cliche that people had until then, I think, unfairly labelled him. Peterson's dissent dispiritingly epitomizes the modern malaise of wounded thought leaders and their fans retreating to their corners, becoming the most extreme versions of themselves, defining themselves as being in opposition to others and lashing out in fury, perpetuating war. I said that I could give you many examples as well as Jordan Peterson, but some obvious other ones are Russell Brand or my old friend Graham Linehan. Become so common that experts in online radicalization have come up with a new category for people like that. The category is called MUU, mixed, unstable, unclear, where, quote, ideology is so mixed up with personal grievance that it can be difficult in such cases to know what the driving motives are. So how about the rest of us? Those of us who don't want to constantly fight culture wars, who would rather see things come together than fall apart. According to the group More in Common, we make up 67% of the population. Way back in 2015, my friend, the documentary maker Adam Curtis, said something to me that took a long time to come true. But Adam is a kind of futurist. His predictions do come true most often. He said, quote, I have this perverse theory that in about 10 years' time, sections of the internet will have become like the American inner cities of the 1980s, like a John Carpenter film, where among the ruins there are fierce warrior gangs, all with their own complex codes and rules, all shouting at each other, and everyone else will have fled to the suburbs of the internet, where you can move on and change the world. I think those suburbs are going to be the exciting, dynamic future of the internet. But to build them, I think it will be necessary to leave the warrior trolls behind. I think we can see Adam's prediction come true in the way that people are fleeing Twitter for threads, which may or may not prove to be a less toxic place. In the early days of Twitter, it felt extraordinary that everyone suddenly had the ability to see into everyone else's world, to learn about societies that were different to ours. But it failed. It was a failed experiment because people became very judgmental of each other's worlds. And when you fill your head with judgment, there's no room for curiosity. If we didn't like the way people were leading their lives, we would try to bring them down. And so instead, people are retreating to the suburbs, to something that actually looks like the very earliest days of the internet, to special interest communities on Reddit and Discord, private places where people can talk about their shared interests without fear of being torn down by outsiders. Those are the safe places to be now. I want to leave you with one last thought. I'm far from the first person to point out that while everybody had been so obsessed with Hugh Edwards, Boris Johnson broke a court order by failing to hand over his phone and his WhatsApp messages to the COVID inquiry. Were we being played? Were the powers that be giving us bread and circuses to distract us? I don't know, maybe. What I do know for sure is that powerful people benefit in myriad ways from public shamings. Take Justine Sacco. Her name was usually Googled 40 times a month. The night of her shaming, she was Googled 1,120,000 times, which meant Google made several $100,000 in advertising from her destruction. Whereas the people doing the actual shaming, we were like unpaid shaming interns for Google and Twitter. We got nothing. Thank you.
That was fantastic, John. Thank you so much. And
thanks.
Really interesting to hear your sort of updates on, a number of stories that are very familiar to me. And as I said to you before, I've only just finished the reread of your book. And I, again, as I said before, I'd thoroughly encourage everyone who hasn't read it to go out and read it. It's both poignant and very funny. I'm not here to sell John's book, but genuinely, I think there's something really relevant for today's world, and we can learn an awful lot about it. So there's many more stories like the ones that John just highlighted. We've got a few minutes where we could do some questions. So I'm going to ask, if you do want to ask a question of John, if maybe you could put your hand up in the chat, not the chat, sorry. If you put your hand up on your screen, either I should be able to see that, or Ava should be able to see that, and then she will take you off mute put you on the screen, and then you can chat direct to Jon, which I think is a great honour. So let's give a pause to that and ask if anyone's got any questions from Jon from that on the basis of that talk, please.
No one's raising their hand as yet. I understand why. It's always much harder. It's much easier to give a talk than it is to ask a question from the audience. I find that I don't think I've ever asked a question at an event.
You're absolutely right, Jon. And actually, while I say that, we've got a couple of questions. But the other thing I meant to say was, if you don't want to ask, and if you are feeling shy, you can also email me at president@cipr.co.uk, and I will ask your question for you, or I can put it up on screen if you've got a bad connection, etc. And Ava will put that into the chat as well. So it's president@cipr.co.uk. But we have got a couple of questions. So let me ask Rachel Clamp first to ask a question. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve, and thanks, Jon. Absolutely fascinating, albeit slightly terrifying talk. I'm just intrigued, maybe I don't want to say it seems too negative, but how long do you think Threads becomes a bit of a cesspool?
I mean, I've already started to notice like all the sort of knee-jerk negativity creeping in after just, a couple of days. People are starting to like hate people. So, I mean, it waits to be seen. I do think these things are very often top down. I remember Seth Rogen saying that he met the person who ran Instagram and he was like a delightful man. And Instagram definitely has its problems, but by and large, it's a way more delightful place than most other social media places, for those of us, especially who love nothing more than to see videos of unlikely friendships between different types of animals, which is my favorite thing in the world, a dog cuddling a duck. So anyway, my wider point is that, I think the tone of sites are top down. You see that very clearly with Elon Musk, and before Elon Musk, I think Jack Dorsey was, very bad in his own way too, a different way to Elon Musk. So that's a roundabout way of saying if the people who are running Threads are genuinely trying to be kind-hearted and create a positive atmosphere, who knows? Maybe it will trickle down in that way. How? I don't know. But I have noticed that these things are top down.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. There was an interesting, for anyone who's interested, that on Threads there's a post from Duncan Moskowitz, who was one of the founders of Facebook, with an image which sort of has two paths going off in different directions. And there's a sort of path to Twitter, which has kind of got, Nazis, bots, all the negative things. And then Threads, which is kind of like positivity and stuff. And when you were saying that, Jon, it did make me think that how long is it going to be before those two paths converge, really? And isn't it a good week for Meta, which we don't get very often?
God, for people to be like rooting for Mark Zuckerberg is
like someone, one of our members, I don't think he's here tonight, but he was saying the other day, like it's like when you've got your main bank and your Monzo accounts. And I was like, isn't it like when you've got your main bank and your First Direct account, which is owned by HSBC? I mean, let's not pretend this is kind of a massive startup, right? So anyway.
Exactly. But at least it shows just the level of, animus people have towards Elon Musk, and rightly so. I mean, Elon Musk's first act, lest we never forget that pretty much the first tweet that Elon Musk made after taking over Twitter was to spread a conspiracy theory about the brutal attack on Nancy Pelosi's husband being a sex game. I mean, it's horrific. It's unthinkable. So, that's the reason why, so many people are fleeing, is because we're just repulsed by the way that Elon Musk is behaving on Twitter.
True. Right. Let me ask Alison Gallagher-Hughes to come and ask her question, please.
Hi, Jon. Can I just say that was a really powerful, thought-provoking piece that you kind of put forward there, with lots of kind of interesting perspectives. The one thing I wanted to ask you was, obviously in your closing statement, you talk about people retreating into the suburbs. And we've kind of seen a little bit of that anyway, where people kind of stick to their own kind of groups, and therefore you'll also kind of see a slight polarization of opinion. And I just wondered how you thought, that reverse sort of tactic could affect the social platforms, and whether what the answer may be in trying to be able to share opinion without is it up to social media channels to kind of police content better, or do you think it's just kind of social behavior has changed as a result of those of what we've come to know as the norm over recent years?
It's a really good question. I mean, obviously the internet, I did an episode of my BBC show Things Fell Apart about the kind of origins of the internet, the libertarian origins of the internet, and how it was these, sort of free speech absolutists who were, demanding that the internet was made in their image. I can't deny feeling dispirited by the way that people behave on social media. It does make you feel, makes you feel dispirited about the sort of casual cruelty that we're all capable of. But at the same time, I do think the fact that our leaders, the tech utopians, were these amoral, absolutist libertarians, definitely prodded at those things. And I do believe that a more positive and kind-hearted leadership of various social media platforms can create a better atmosphere. Personally, I've been spending, well, two things. Firstly, the number of people over the last, I'd say 2 months, who've mentioned Discord to me. I think Discord is looking like the future of the internet, of social media. And Discord really does feel like the very, very earliest days of the internet, when people would meet on these news groups and discuss very niche topics, and they were private and other people couldn't look in. I've had personal experience. I had surgery a couple of weeks ago for this condition called diverticulitis. And so I've been spending a lot of time on the diverticulitis Reddit board, which has proved to be a kind of wonderful, kind-hearted community of all these people who have the same condition, all, supporting each other and offering advice. And there's very little meanness and nastiness. So my view is that this idea of everybody being able to just leap into each other's worlds, was a great utopian experiment that failed. And personally, I think the future is going to be more things like Reddit and Discord, these more niche communities.
Thank you. And thank you, Alison, for the question. Samuel Wallace, over to you. I think you can put your cameras on, by the way, guys, when Ava puts you on, in case you want to see John as well.
I'll be seen.
Thanks, Stephen.
Hi.
Thanks, John, for the talk. It was really interesting. And I completely agree about Discord, by the way. I think that definitely does feel like the direction we're going, with more closed interest groups where people can congregate around their shared experiences. I guess one of the things I was interested, if you had any thoughts on, is around the ability to be anonymous on social media and how that impacts on the experience of public shaming. I guess on places like Twitter, you're much more able to be anonymous than on other platforms, and whether you think that makes people more likely to participate in public shaming, and whether trying to become anonymous is a way to escape from being publicly shamed.
I think to an extent that's the case, but also some of the most keen shamers are doing it for what they consider to be moral reasons. They're doing it to sort of what they, their perception of righting wrongs. And so a lot of those people aren't anonymous because they're very proud of what they're doing. I guess the anonymous shamers are more like trolls and, quote unquote, edgelords, and just want to, create, they just get pleasure out of creating chaos. But in a way, the worst shamers are the ones who are doing it with a moral purpose, and quite often they're not anonymous. They're all a whole manner of social scientists have shown over the years that, and this is no surprise, but that we're more violent when we think about our violence as being done for moral reasons. So actually, I've always thought the anonymity of social media hasn't been as big an influence on the sort of severity of shamings as other people might think. And in fact, contrarily, I have an anonymous account on the diverticulitis. And so when I started when I started posting about my condition, I was doing it under my own name. So I was telling these like really intimate things about my, my bodily functions. And then suddenly people started going, oh my God, I love your books. So I thought, okay, that's a bad idea. So I switched to an anonymous account. And it was very freeing to be anonymous. But I've got to tell you, even anonymously, all I am is like delightful and helpful. And so actually, I think whether or not you're anonymous is less important than, what's driving you as a person.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Samuel, for the question. John Clements.
Hello, John.
Hey.
Hello there. When I was reading coverage this week of the death of Milan Kundera, the novelist, there was a quote from him in a conversation he had with Philip Roth, where he said, people all over the world nowadays prefer to judge rather than to understand, and to answer rather than to ask. And now the thing is, he said this to Philip Roth in 1980.
Wow.
And it seemed very prescient and very pertinent to now. So I just wonder whether what we're talking about is human nature, and human nature just won't change. It'll just be amplified by whatever technological tool we're given to do our worst.
Yeah. No, it's true. And, the fact that he said that way back in 1980 is startling. I do think, look, I always felt when I was writing my book, The Psychopath Test and so on, I really started to feel good about my fellow humans. It's like, other than the 1% of people walking around who are psychopaths, I would think, the rest of us are, we're empathetic, we want to do good, we want to be kind to people, we want to be helpful. And I've got to say, writing So You've Been Publicly Shamed really disabused me of all of that. I was and remain shocked at our capacity for just this, casual cruelty and all the games, all the psychological games we play with ourselves to not feel bad about the bad things that we do, the way that we, dehumanize the people that we hurt and so on. It's stuff out of, it's stuff out of despotism we do every single day. So I think it is unfortunately true that cold, instant judgment seems to drive us and give us dopamine hits, more than we would like to think that it does. At the same time, I think when we have people in positions of leadership who want to prod at that for their own ends, that's when it gets like a lot worse. We are swayed, by the people in charge of us. And I think if the people in charge of us are these free speech absolutists who rather enjoy, the Elon Musks who enjoy the chaos and in fact, theoretically financially benefit from the chaos, although it doesn't seem like Musk is financially benefiting much from Twitter, things do get worse. And I think if so in the end, those of us who are, still trying to, the 67% of us, according to More in Common, who want to end wars rather than start wars, all we can do, I think, is just, I've been living in America too long because of what I'm about to say, be the positive change that we want to see in the world, just act the way that we would like the world to be. And I think it helps. I think it does help.
Thanks, John.
Thanks. Thank you, John. And I like the way you spell your name.
John, we've run quite over time already. I wonder if you can give us 4 more minutes and we can ask one more question, or how are you doing for time?
Sure, if people would like.
Perfect. We've got quite a few questions left, so I'm not sure everyone's going to get their question tonight, but maybe they can email, and we can always email them on if that's possible. But the book So You've Been Publicly Shamed, I think, starts when someone creates a bot of you on Twitter, which sends you in. I mean, it's in many ways the longest revenge story in history. 80,000 words of bitterness about these people, and you know what, John, they deserved it. Anyway, with that sort of on, he's put his hand down. There was someone called Steve Smith who asked a question. So I was wondering if that was a similar bot. We've got a couple of hands up, so apologies to those who put their hands down. But Claire Slipper, you've had your hand up for quite a while, so maybe you can ask the last question.
Thank you, Stephen. Thanks, John. Sorry, I don't know how to turn on my camera, but it's such a pleasure to speak to you, and thanks for taking the time to give that really interesting talk.
Thank you.
You might give us a bit of advice, I suppose, as individuals working in PR and communications. Obviously, as you've identified, we're working in a ever faster news cycle, and sometimes that can give a lot of pressure from clients or from organizations to deliver a fast headline, I suppose, and the more sensational the better. So I suppose, in your experience in investigative journalism and all the other work that you do, what is your advice really for getting really thoughtful and measured stories out there?
Right, well, patience, curiosity instead of judgment, being aware of our own biases. I've always thought that's like a really important part of being just being a human being, but also being a writer, is to be aware of our own stupidities, our own biases. I think a lot of people behave in the bad ways that they do because they succumb to cognitive biases, confirmation bias and cognitive dissonance, these tricks we play on ourselves. And so I think the more aware we are of our own biases, I think the more, empathetic we can be to just the complexities of human behavior, the fact that human beings tend not to be either magnificent heroes or sickening villains, despite, the way that Twitter likes to make out humans to be. I used to always think, by the way, like on Twitter, it's very easy to feel kind of aghast when we're just, tearing somebody apart for being like the worst human who ever lived, just no matter how minor their transgression was. But we do the same things to like people who behave heroically too. It's like they're the greatest hero who ever lived. And in a way, it's kind of just as dysfunctional, because really we're all just we're a mess. Heroic people do stupid things. Bad people do good things, besides, the small number of people who have severe personality disorders that manifest themselves in just behaving in malevolent ways to other people. Most of us are basically just a complicated mess of good and bad. And I think that's very important to remember. But also in PR terms, that line, I can't remember whether Max Mosley said it to me or I said it to him, but that line about how our shameworthiness lies in the space between who we are and how we present ourselves to the world. And if we can narrow that gap to nothing, then it means we're much less likely to be shamed or cancelled or whatever you want to call it. I think that's a really interesting point. If you tell the truth about yourself to people, then it's harder for people to get you, I think.
Thank you.
I think that's a really good place to finish. John, it's a really weird thing. We talk about digital culture a lot. I know you're one of the global experts on digital culture, but you've got a room full of 112 people here. You won't hear any clapping, but inside we're clapping. It must be you've fantastic energy for the last half or 40 minutes or so, because it's very hard speaking to a room where we're not physically there. But we do so appreciate you joining us from New York. And one of the questions, which maybe is a point to end on, someone emailed me to say, what's next? We're all excited. What do we follow next from Jon Ronson? Is it a podcast? Is it a book? Is it a new film?
Not a new film, but both of the other things. I'm currently making the second season of my BBC show Things Fell Apart, which I have to say, like, I don't know how many of you heard the first season, but it's
I did.
Great, and I'm very, very proud of it. We really did some great work there, and the second season is, I think, shaping up to be just as good. So I'm very happy about that. And I am finally writing another book. I've been reluctant to write more books. I'm haunted by a joke that Stuart Lee said, which is that we spend the first half of our lives building a legacy, and then the second half of our lives destroying the legacy. And I'm determined not to be that person. I'm determined not to write a book that's going to destroy the legacy of all my previous books. But I'm pretty certain within the next 2 years, I will have a book written, as well as Things Fell Apart season 2. So that's my next stuff.
Brilliant. Well, that's something to look forward to. Thank you so much for your time today. Please, everyone else, stay on for the AGM. But please everyone say a big thank you to Jon for your time today, and apologies to those who couldn't ask him questions. Thank you, Jon.
Thank you so much, Steve. It was a pleasure. And thank you, everybody. I will log off now. Okay,
Great. Have a great rest of the
bye.
day. Thanks, John. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.
Right. Now, please do stay with me if you can. After that fascinating talk, let's get to the formal business of the AGM. And I'll move relatively quickly, obviously, because we went slightly longer with John than planned. So there are two matters which we're putting to vote at this meeting. One's the approval of the 2022 AGM minutes, and the other is the reappointment of Vincent, who are our auditors for the 2023 audit. For both of these votes, we'll be using the Zoom polling function. When votes are called, you'll see the options appear on your screen, and you can cast your vote there. Apologies, we won't be posting documents on the screen during the meeting for accessibility reasons, but as a reminder, you can download those papers for the meeting from our website. And please, Eva, if you could just republish the link in the chat for anyone who arrived late. So the main purpose of an AGM is to look back at the previous year. So I'll invite Rachel Roberts now to review what we achieved over that period. And that will take place after minutes are approved. And we will also touch on Rachel Clamp's plans for 2024. So let me start with the approval of 2022 AGM minutes. Can I ask so everyone to pick those up for you? If there are any questions about the minutes, if you think there are any errors based on those people who came last year, please can I ask you to raise your hand in the webinar chat. Christina, you've got your hand up, but I don't know if it's a legacy hand or not.
Sorry, yeah, I think it is a legacy hand. I'll see if I can get that down.
No problem. You can ask a question about the AGM minutes if you want.
No, it's okay.
Okay, well, thank you. Right, if there are no questions about the minutes themselves, can I ask, so you will be able to vote on approving the minutes whether or not you attended last year, but can I ask someone who did attend last year to propose those, please, for me? Yes, David Hamilton. David, if you could go on screen and just say, my name is David Hamilton, I'll approve that. Oh, your hand's gone down again, sorry. Yes, your hand's up again. Right, David, if you could take David off. Well, Adam, do you want to propose the minutes from last year? And David's on screen. You can both propose the minutes, I don't mind. You both great.
I've slightly lost my voice, Steve, but yes, I'm very happy to put the minutes forward.
Thank you, David. Much appreciated. Can I have a seconder, please?
Happy to second those.
Thank you, Adam. Much appreciated. Right, Ava, if you could just put the vote up on screen now. And when people have had a chance to vote, put the results up.
Would you like me to end the poll now?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, if you could show the results of the poll, please. Yeah, thank you. Brilliant, thank you. I'll assume the abstains are from people who weren't actually there last year. So thank you very much for approving that. Right, I'm now going to hand over to Rachel Roberts. For those of you who know Rachel quite well and are thinking, gosh, but Birmingham's looking very nice today. She's actually in Switzerland, and I have to say a huge thank you. This is the kind of level of commitment you have to be for CIPR President. Rachel's joining us from honeymoon. Despite prompting from me to say, just enjoy your time on honeymoon, she said, no, members are everything to me. I want to come and join the AGM. I want to do my bit. So I'm not planning to get married next year, but if I do, there's no way you're seeing me here. Rachel Clamp's doing my bit. So over to you, Rachel Roberts.
Thanks, Steve. I had some sound issues with my headphones before, so I've had to just talk loudly into my computer now. But it is really great to join today's AGM. I am on my travels, but of course, being in Switzerland, I thought everything would go like clockwork, and it has been brilliant. But I was really hacked off the other day. I had to wait 3 minutes for a bus. But generally, yeah, connection works. That's brilliant. Great to be able to join. So back to the agenda, taking a moment as part of the AGM to look back and reflect on achievements and learnings from last year is really valuable. I think in our busy lives, I don't know if you're like me, but so busy, constantly looking ahead to whatever burning bridge is on fire or the next big thing that's on the to-do list. Sometimes you can race ahead and not take a moment to reflect, but the AGM does give us that opportunity, but also to recognise and thank so many people for a great year of hard work and achievement. If we refer to our annual report, you can see a wealth of activities undertaken, together with the data that illustrates we added an extra 1,000 members to our membership community last year, and grew chartered practitioners, and lots of other many achievements. I'm not going to take you through a diary of 2022 because that would be here all night, but the rich initiatives driven by CIPR, whether centrally or through endeavours of volunteers, have been huge. And in reality, what we expect from CIPR is actually huge. Our stakeholders now expect us to be omnipresent. We need to be online. We need to be at face-to-face events across social, digital media. I'm not sure if we've got a Threads account already, but I'm sure everyone will expect us to be there. Oh, thumbs up from Alastair, brilliant. We need to be at grassroots, regionally, nationally, internationally. And perhaps as members, me included, we often focus on times when things don't go well. And I did have quite a few emails to that effect, but also lots of really positive stuff that people have been proactive and come forward to say, brilliant job by CIPR. So just tonight, taking a step back, reflecting as communications professionals, we do set a very high bar of expectations. And in fairness, the CIPR has really responded to our desire to keep on growing and be present where our stakeholders and audiences are. The organisation delivers podcasts, virtual events, in-person events. We now have our own app, so taking steps into that channel to communicate. Lots more opportunity, obviously, to grow in that area. The CIPR promotes the industry, we train the industry, we represent the industry in the UK and internationally, and that is a big job. So I'm not going to take you through all the events, and if you have missed any from last year, please do read the annual report. It's a great read to reflect on the wealth of stuff that's happened. But for me, taking a step back and thinking, well, how could have everything we undertook last year been achieved? It really has been down to harnessing the power of people. So they're my two highlights from 2022, and I think collectively will deliver a real lasting legacy to our profession. Often presidents talk about what's happened over the last year and talk about individual activities, but we all like to think that the work we've done over the last year will have a lasting effect on the industry. And I think from the perspective of harnessing the power of people, two key things we did last year will really help contribute to that. From my perspective, the most insightful strategy and the most brilliant plan, work plan, it can't be delivered without people. And with the rise of AI in the future, maybe that's not going to be so. I hope not, because I think fostering human relationships and working alongside others, sharing the journey with others who can relate and listen and learn from your experience, that enriches us all. So I hope that robots won't take over, but happily in our work plan for 2022, it was definitely reliant on the great work of some brilliant people. So the two takeaways, as I say, for me, that I just want to touch on tonight is really about harnessing the power of people, which really centred on growing and strengthening the CIPR community and our professional community. So as I remarked in my 2021 AGM address, we can grow influence and recognition for the PR profession through increasing the number of people who engage with CIPR, because that creates more people to bang the drum for qualified PR counsel. But the people banging the drums must be represented by PR professionals from across all communities that we serve. So last year we made a really big, important step change to move the dial on broadening representation. Now, volunteers have been pursuing this goal for years, principally through our diversity and inclusion network, and they've been doing an incredible job. And I'm grateful to have learned so much from many people in this area, but particularly Avita Patel, Avril Lee, Cornelius Alexander, and Sarah Thornhurst. But progress in this area is too important to be resourced by the goodwill of volunteers who all have day jobs. So I really wanted to thank Alastair for taking on board feedback in 2021 to resource responsibility and to pursue a strategy to drive change in the area of diversity, inclusion and equality, and by setting the goal to achieve the national equality standard. Our aim is to ensure that the CIPR can be assessed and be represented by PR practitioners, irrespective of backgrounds, and by working through the NES process, we can take bigger steps and accelerate change. Already, as a result of working through the NES process, there's been a lot of change happening behind the scenes, but it's really important that everyone accepts that engagement in EDI is an eternal commitment. It's not a 1 or 2 year work plan item. It's not a job done, we've ticked that box. Really, we need to all understand and commit that as society and culture, the society and culture we live in evolves, we need to ensure that the CIPR and our profession shifts also to make sure that everybody is included as the world changes. So I really want to thank Claire Bloomer and Maha Jamil in particular for driving our EDI programme forward, and all members of our EDI committee, together again with our D&I group, who've challenged and championed us all for a long time to consider how we can be allies for voices in and outside of our profession. So huge achievement in that area, but still a big job to do. The second people-themed outtake for me last year, and a real highlight, was holding our first ever volunteer conference in Leeds in May. This was an initiative championed by our 2020 president, Jenny Field, but postponed due to COVID. So I thank her for creating this valuable opportunity to recognise the huge role volunteers play in delivering the CIPR activities and championing the profession. The conference was about harnessing the power of the people who are amazing ambassadors for our profession, as well as some practical sessions exploring our strategy and values. Lots of things, how to get the most out of committee meetings and all that sort of stuff. It was really brilliant to meet people face to face. That's what I got most out of that session, swapping notes and spending time with others and learning and listening to others and making those human connections. So I make no apology for saying this a lot, but in our age of AI, it's really important to remember that great public relations comes from great human relations, connecting, learning, listening, and growing our understanding of what makes people tick. And the volunteer conference certainly did that for me, and also all the many meetings and events attended across the year. As president, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to meet so many CIPR members and non-members as well, virtually and in person. So in conclusion, I just wish to thank all those who contributed to the work of the CIPR in 2022. Again, please do take a look at the annual report. So much brilliant stuff happened last year. But as I spoke about in 2021, as I talked about my forthcoming year, last year wasn't my year, it was our year. And together we can all be really proud of delivering impact, more members, more voices, and more understanding about the value of professional, qualified public relations practice. So thank you very much for supporting me as we delivered 2022, but really thank you for everyone's contribution. As I say, it wasn't my year, it was our year, and I think it was a good year done. So thanks, Steve.
Brilliant, thank you, Rachel, and well done. There will be enough chance to ask Rachel and Alastair and me questions at the end, but we'll crack on through. Just to say, you know, Rachel talks about EDI. She's been a massive champion. I'm not sure she thanked herself, but she's been a massive champion of EDI for this organisation. We've made real progress on it over the last year. Something we should all be very, very proud of. But it's a journey, and we've got a lot to do. We wanted to get the CIPR house in order before really addressing some of the EDI challenges for the entire industry. But we really feel much more of a champion for EDI than perhaps we were a couple of years ago. We've now got a board level subcommittee which Rachel chairs, dedicated to it, building on the work that Avril Lee and Cornelius Alexander did, and the others in the diversity panel. So yeah, we're really proud of that as part of what we do. So well done, Rachel, for that and everything else that you've done for CIPR, and thank you. Right, Alastair gets the most exciting thing to talk about. I know you've all been really excited to hear about the 2022 accounts. So let me pass you over to Alastair, our CEO, to talk you through those briefly. Thank you, Alastair.
Thank you very much, Steve. Yes, I hope everyone's had an opportunity to look at the accounts, which we published a few days ago, and they're up together with the other papers for this AGM. I think Rachel's remarks in the last few minutes will have given you a sense of the energy that she brought as president to our work, and that really, suffused everything we did last year as we sort of pushed in every direction to make progress and to achieve some tangible results. And the results of that financially was a bit unfortunate. So in 2021, we were very cautious. We didn't know quite, how the world was going to look. We didn't know if people were going to want to attend events. We didn't know if we were going to be able to attend events. And so we sat on too much money in 2021, and as a result, we made the largest surplus in our history of £376,000, which of course isn't what we're here for. We're a non-profit organisation. We're not here to make gigantic surpluses. So in 2022, we really set out to renew the energy and vigour across all our programmes, and drive very hard for growth in membership numbers, push hard to get up the number of chartered practitioners, go back to face-to-face events for excellence, and so on and so forth. And some of that worked very effectively. We grew by more than 1,000 members. We chartered our 500th member along the way. Some things didn't quite go the way we thought they would go. We ran probably too many training sessions with too few people, so we were very reluctant to start cancelling sessions in the first year when people were actually able to start coming back together again. So we ran sessions that were not really economical in the way that we would have wanted them to be before COVID. The Pride Awards didn't do particularly well last year, although there was a significant increase in spending for local group-run events to go alongside them. And we also noticed a slowing down in the time that people were taking to complete their qualifications. So in 2020, at the start of the COVID crisis, people were registering and completing their qualifications in record time. They'd never completed so fast. And in 2022, that kind of went into reverse as people went back to face-to-face work in the office, and other things took over in life, and it all began to slow down. So the result was we were very ambitious, and we were not realistic enough around this time of the year last year, and we thought that we were going to end up with a small surplus. In fact, by the time we got to year end, we'd made a loss. We made a loss of £71,000, and that was a disappointment to me personally, most particularly because we thought we were going to be in the black at the end of the year, even if not by very much. What I want to say about that is, although it's the first loss we made since 2016, and it was unplanned. So what we've done this year is really tighten up our internal controls and procedures, so that we have a much better sense of where we're going. We look much more attentively at the forward business pipeline, and so hopefully we'll have a better sense of how our operating environment is shaping up. So we'd not be looking to repeat that loss in the current year or in future years. And growth is continuing this year. We are on target to add another 1,000 members. We've just signed up our 200th corporate affiliate. And looking forward, we have about 600 people who have said that they want to get chartered. So it's possible in Rachel Clamp's presidency next year, we will charter our 1,000th person. That's certainly what we're aiming for. I want to say a word about the impact of making a loss. obviously that loss followed on from a gigantic surplus the year before. So although it's not good news, it doesn't put us into any financial jeopardy. Our reserves are reasonable. Our reserves are just under 4 months expenditure, which isn't what we're aiming for, and we'd like it to be about 6 months. But our level of reserves at the moment is about the same as it was just before COVID. So not where we would like to be ideally, but not in a particularly precarious place either. So although the financial result isn't good and it isn't what we expected, I don't think it's there's anything underlying in the business that members should be concerned about, and we'll obviously be aiming to do better next year. So I think that's all I wanted to say about that, and obviously I'll take questions on what I've just discussed and not anything else in the accounts.
Thank you, Alastair. And Jenny, if I could ask you to hold your question for about 10 minutes, we'll take questions afterwards. I appreciate that it's hard to ask questions on accounts when you can't see them, so I'm very happy to put that slide back on screen in about 10 minutes if you want to ask your question then, if that's okay. Thank you, Alastair, for that, and we can, as I say, talk about the accounts in a second. I'd like members to vote on whether or not to reappoint Sarah Vincent as our auditors, just before we go to Rachel Clamp. Ava, perhaps if you could put or we can have a nominator actually for Sarah Vincent first as the auditors. Rachel Roberts, thank you. Is anyone happy to second them? John Wilkinson, maybe?
John's hand is up.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say, Ava, if we could just put John on screen, because he has to say for the camera, I believe.
Sorry, do you want who on the screen?
John Wilkinson. He's got his hand up.
He is on the screen.
Oh, is that because I can't see him because of the? Oh, thank you, John. I think you're off mute. Are you happy to second the Sarah Vincent recommendation?
I am happy to second the Sarah Vincent recommendation.
Fantastic. For those who don't know, John used to chair the finance committee, so is a veritable person to do that. Right. Let's, Ava, then have that second vote, please, for Sarah Vincent. A slight pause while we give everyone a chance to vote. And Ava, when you're happy that everyone's had a chance to vote, if you'd let us know the results, please. Maybe while we're waiting for that, Ava, if you take the slide down, and then we can hand over to Rachel in a second. Thank you so much.
I think we got all the votes that we could get for now.
Okay.
I will end the poll in 2 seconds. If someone hasn't voted, please just raise your hand. But oh, one more vote came in. Another vote. I think they've stopped now. I will end the poll and share the results.
Right. Thank you very much. That's appointed with a strong majority, 86%. Thank you very much, everyone. Right. Just before we get to the Q&A, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce Rachel Clamp to speak to you. Rachel's going to be the president in 2024. Tough act to follow. Rachel Roberts, I mean, not me. And is a fabulous person who's been a CIPR member and supporter for a long time. Hopefully she will tell you that she's the driving force, or one of the driving forces. Apologies, Donna, I can see you on the call as well, behind the lobbying campaign, which is probably one of let's say the most successful public campaign that CIPR has ever done in 75 years. So a fantastic person to take over at exactly the right time. So over to you, Rachel.
Thanks, Steve. I'm not sure I need to say anything now. It's amazing. But I think it's almost picking up on what Rachel said. It's people, and I think over the last few years, the board that we've had, the team that we've had, volunteers that we've had, that's what's been able to make the most amazing things happen. So I'm going to keep this quite short. Which, for those who don't know, that's just like me. And also, just in case you're wondering, another Rachel, yes, that's why I've got the A in my name. It's another or again. So you won't forget the difference between the two of us and Rachel again. Right, so we talked a bit about the past, and we've heard that, and you've heard little bits and pieces from Alastair as well about things that we've got going on in the present. But now I'm going to take a very, very brief look at 24. In short, you're going to see a lot more of the same. I think, as we've just heard from Alastair, we've spent lots of time and money over the last few years investing in things, and now it's about embedding them. Because over the last few years, we've had to react to outside factors, and as well as moving ahead with our own agenda. Rachel's touched on lots of things, but over the last few years, we've gone 100% virtual for the team. We've aligned websites and back office activities, launched the app and the online work learning platform, to name just a handful of things that we have been doing, both things that you as members, we as members will have seen, but also hopefully some things that you haven't seen, to keep everything moving. And as Steve just touched on as well, our work in lobbying and then also AI and PR continues to be the best in the industry and is making a difference in what we're seeing come out. But what does this mean for 24? Well, like I just said, we're going to refine and really embed what we've already implemented and really make it start to make the difference that we want it to. We're going to look holistically at virtual and digital strategy. Exactly how do we want it to be working better for you as members and for HQ to be able to support members and deliver on what's needed to be delivered on from the strategy, for the strategy and for training. We're going to continue and actually further build on the brilliant advocacy work that we've been doing around lobbying and AI, and also then we look at realigning our ESG work, because that's such a vast, vast area. As you know, getting practitioners chartered will continue also to be at the heart of what we do. As Alastair mentioned, last year we passed 500. These are massive milestones. And the reason why I so strongly believe in these, if you were at the Midlands conference last week, you'd have heard me say, we are part of an incredible industry. We are a strategic business function, and we can start to we demonstrate this by having that chartered status that sits along other functions as well. Because we offer a view of business from a different point of view. We're commercially savvy, we are leaders, we are creative, we're empathetic, we are the relationship builders, and we are the objective deliverers. We are quite something, all of us together. And so 24 is about ensuring that we are a sustainable, successful and supportive CIPR that is home to all practitioners. The details of the work plan, I think as Rachel mentioned, is currently in development, and hopefully before the end of the year, I will be able to share with as many of you as I can some of those projects in greater detail. But most importantly, what it will mean for members, not just what the projects are. I'd love for more of you to get involved. So please do get in touch through those various usual channels. And I look forward to seeing you all much, much more as we run out towards the end of the year and then into next year. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rachel. So we've got a good few minutes now for Q&A. So maybe I can ask Rachel Roberts, Rachel Clamp, Alastair's already on screen, to put your videos on. We can take any questions that you have. Jenny, sorry, I can't see you there. Jenny, I know you had a question about the accounts. If you want to put your hand up again, we can take that. But I've got Jenny Beattie. So I'm going to go slightly out of order, Ava, if that's okay. Let me take Jenny Beattie's question first, because Jenny had her hand up earlier. and then we'll go in the other order. So Jenny, after you.
Yes, it's just a quick question for Alastair, actually. When he was talking about the accounts, he mentioned that everything was going to be okay because of the forward pipeline. I wonder if he could just flesh that out. I'm not sure that I understood.
Okay, well, what I meant by that was traditionally in finance, particularly, we look backwards. You know, so we look at the last quarter's accounts and we say, how does that performance, did that match expectations and budget, and therefore based on past performance, what do we think is going to happen with the future. Over the last year, we've been able to get a bit better at understanding what business is likely to come our way, and some examples of that are in the corporate affiliate field. We actually have a queue of PR employers who are waiting for us to speak to them and start an onboarding process. So we know that there are about 30 employers in that queue. So if that number starts to drop, if we go down to 12 and then maybe 6, then what that's telling us is that something's changing in the market, and that for some reason organizations are not as willing as they were last year to sign up to making their staff members. So that tells us about what our expectations should be in the future. A similar thing happens with in-house training when large organizations, which might be European Patent Office or Petronas, approach us and start conversations about sometimes very big contracts that will extend over multiple years on multiple sites to teach hundreds of people. So we see how many of those conversations we have queued on. How much work does that represent? I mean, much as you would do, in any agency context, I think. And another example is on chartership, where if we go back 3 or 4 years, it was like, well, let's put some dates in the calendar and then email everyone and see who shows up. Oh, there's only 4 of them, and now we've gone to a different system whereby we ask people to express an interest, and then we actively follow them, and we sort of encourage them to kind of pick a date and get themselves assessed. And as I mentioned, we have about 600 people in that pipeline at the moment, which is it's actually more people than we currently have chartered. It's the greatest number we've ever had. So we can be confident in those kinds of areas that we're not going to put out 40 dates for chartership assessment and get 16 people signing up. So we have a better view of what level of activity we can expect over coming months.
Thank you. Jenny, does that answer your question?
Yes, I just sort of see like a long line of people in a pipeline, but I think if CIPR was my client, I'd actually want to see something signed and sealed, but I understand what he's saying.
Thank you. Thank you very much for taking time for your question. I really appreciate it. Moving over to Robert Park, please.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Steve. I've got a question in relation to the annual report from last year, and it goes into Rachel's vision for 2024, which is to do with the big oil versus the world, and the audacious PR plot and climate change and ESG and aligning ESG. Late last year, I did a very quick look at 75 PR firms, of all sizes, to see what they were doing with their clients. And actually, it's quite a mixed bag. And what can the CIPR learn from last year's big oil documentary? And how is the ESI monitor within the professional development opportunities getting more practitioners knowledgeable about carbon, about net zero, carbon neutrality, and all the little different bits and bobs that sometimes gets missed within the message that goes out there within the strategic communications?
Brilliant. Really good question. Thank you, Robert. Let me perhaps ask Alastair to start with that, talk a little bit about the ESG work we're doing this year. And I know it's like me, watched aghast at Big Oil versus the World when that came out last year. And then Rachel to follow on with any thoughts she has on next year and kind of where we're taking the ESG stuff. So Alastair, to start, please.
Well, I guess you'll have seen that this year we published our first ESG report, which was, and we used the ESI monitor to determine what our carbon footprint was. That was a new thing for me, and almost immediately I ran into a couple of instances of how difficult and unclear this area is, because I wanted to offset our carbon footprint. The number of organisations that can straightforwardly answer the question, can I offset 440 tonnes of CO2 equivalent with you, is alarmingly low. People they want to tell you their scheme or tell you about their initiatives, whatever, but actually just answering that question seems quite a challenge for a lot of people. I also attended a session where somebody in another professional body of similar size reported their carbon footprint as being 44 tonnes. And I was absolutely, dumbfounded. And I went up to him afterwards and said, well, how come, we're very similar organisations, but our footprint is literally 10 times yours? He said, well, obviously we don't measure everything. He said, we're focused on change, so we're measuring the things that we can change. I thought, well, that's very nice, but that's not what we're doing. So I suppose there is this question of making sure that members are as informed as they possibly can be about technical terms and understanding what's all involved. But the more I get into this area that's new to me, the more it seems to me to be an absolute minefield of claims and counterclaims, and how easy it is, even for well-intentioned people, to say something that's misleading or to get the wrong end of the stick about something. And my only other reflection on the Big Oil thing was how I think the point was made in the series of documentaries. The same tactics were copied from the tobacco campaign and then transposed onto the oil campaign, and we've then seen them transposed onto climate. So the tricks and the techniques which were exposed in that series are very much in play in the world around us. And I think Rachel Clamp may want to say, I think we certainly the board's discussions in the last couple of months, there's a really strong feeling that we feel called on to do something about that. As the chartered body, we have a responsibility to act in the public interest, and that public interest is not properly served if those sorts of tactics and shenanigans are still going on.
Thank you, Alastair. Rachel?
Yeah, thanks, Alastair. Great comments, and thanks, Robert, for the question. Just building on what Alastair was just saying, we have as a board, I think, as many people have, looked at ESG and thinking, why on earth have we lumped so many massive things into just 3 little letters? Because that doesn't do justice, and which is why I use the term about realigning, because there is a lot more we can do. We all want to be doing more. But if you look at some of the big stuff we have been doing around EDI and lobbying and AI, they all fall under different areas of ESG. And I think that's the thing, we've got a little bit lost as into what is it we can do to support practitioners and our industry, and also for the institute itself. That's what, so I'm going to give you a bit of a fluff answer in the fact I don't know 100% yet what we're going to do. There's a lot that we need to be doing, and we will, as we work through the work plan or shape up the work plan over the next few months, we'll be looking at what we do around those and how it looks. If you want to drop me a note and maybe have a separate conversation, I'd love to hear that, because we do have some folks that want a lot, and maybe we actually just need to concentrate on the E of ESG for next year, because we've got EDI in train, we've got AI and PR, and we've got lobbying. Maybe that's where we go. But at the moment, I can't say for certain, but love to have a chat with you if you want to talk about it some more.
Yeah, I think just to sum that up, Robert, so as Rachel said, we feel, we talked about this at the board about a month ago, we feel that on the S and the G, we're stronger. The E, we've got work to do, but then there's so many different things on E, that on the environment bit, as important as it is, it's kind of working our way in. If you haven't already, I'd encourage you also to look at the work of the CIPR ESG panel and some of the papers they're putting out, because they're helping to educate our members about how to operate in this area as well. We've also got 2 new training courses this year. You can do a sustainability diploma if you really want to get into that area. We've also launched sustainability on demand training, which is members can do at any time. I think that's free for members, Alastair, the on demand training. Yeah, so that's it. So, you know, if anyone on this call who wants to do a free training session on ESG, that's an introduction to the area, talk about some of the, you know, demystify some of the terminology, and sort of understand, you know, how to have a reasonable conversation about it, which is easier said than done, with, you know, because it's quite a scientific area. So that's a really good one to do. Robert, I think you've dropped off, but I hope that answered your question. Oh, you're back, and then. So, Robert, was that okay for you?
No, that's absolutely fantastic, and it wasn't a fluffed answer, because I think it is the grey area which actually, as an organisation, we can get under the bonnet of and really serve some of our clients really well in that.
Yeah, 100%. And I spoke about sustainability at a conference in Slovenia about a week ago, and said exactly that. You know, we have to own ESG. You know, we sort of lost internal comms for a while. We brought that back again from HR. We have a constant battle with marketing for kind of control of different things and social media. ESG is one that investor relations are keen to grab. It's really important that PR has a really strong role in that, and that's something CIPR will be advocating for over the coming years. Right, moving swiftly on, and huge apologies if I mispronounce this. Noor Al Huda, please ask your question. You're on mute. Oh, there you go, you're off on mute.
Hello.
Hi.
Great. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the meeting today and for letting us joining. I have a question regarding the CIPR, more about the groups and the committees and the volunteer work, as I have been a member for over a year now. And I think that it's a bit difficult for you if you are overseas to join a committee or to do something or to contribute in your own way, because everyone will be emailing back saying that we have enough members, and usually it's more of UK citizens. So my question is, if someone is overseas, how can we help or participate or be part of a committee or something that is more active in the CIPR?
Well, let me take that, and then the others can kind of contribute if they have anything to add. So two answers to your question. One, the ever brilliant Rachel Roberts launched the volunteering board last year. So all of the volunteering opportunities now, as part of our commitment to inclusion as well, are put onto that board. It's something Rachel's really championed. And maybe, Ava, if you've got the ability, you could put that into the chat as well, so everyone's got that. So when new volunteering opportunities come up, they will be on that, and we welcome that. I've also worked really hard with council and other committees to make those more inclusive, so make it easier for people to contribute. I'm not sure if Crispin Torrode is still on the call. He certainly was registered for this, but Crispin's on council. He's in Canada. He's also a member of the CIPR International Committee, and he contributes to council calls and makes a really good contribution. You know, I'm not sure where you're based, Nawahuda, but you know, Crispin kind of gets up at about 5 o'clock in the morning to join council calls, which I'm very, very grateful for. But we're trying harder and harder to do things like this, to be online for events. We've got the Maggie Nally lecture coming up later in the year, which is by CIPR International, but is online, particularly so that we can do more for international members. They can join that. And it's a learning process over time, really. We also need feedback from people like yourself who are keen to contribute, to say, if you did this, this would make it easier for me. So I think hopefully, you know, committees, I know there's a number of committees who do struggle to get people on. So I think particularly the sectoral groups is easier to join if you are international. There is CIPR International Group, which genuinely has members from right around the world. I don't know if Samantha Searorum is still on the call, but she was certainly here earlier, and she chairs that, and I'm sure would welcome a connection with you and to see how you can help. We always need ready hands to do things in this organisation. Unless anyone's got anything they want to add, was that a helpful answer?
Yeah, it would be great to have someone who can contact me, or because every time, every reply is, we have enough people, we can't have you at the moment, or it's always like rejection, and I'm not quite sure why, but I think CIPR is more on the international level. So it would be great to have people from all over the world instead of having, because most of the committees, except of course for international, like I would say 80% of each committee are like UK citizens or residents. And for us who live outside UK boundaries, I don't think we get the same opportunity. I understand how it works when you have people who can attend physically and not just online, but still we can contribute, we can participate, and we can be actively involved. So I would really appreciate the opportunity if ever given. So yeah, thank you.
Well, look, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's a challenge, and it's something that, as I tried to put across, that we're trying to improve. Rachel Clamp, I mean, you chair group chairs. Would you be happy to speak to Noah Huda to see if there's a space or to?
Yeah, I'm quite. I'm sorry you've had that experience. We do try. When I was a chair, I don't think I ever turned anybody down. There's always an opportunity, even if it's on a project by project basis, just thinking about time zones. There's always, if you have a willing volunteer, you use them. So I'm really sorry and surprised that you've had that experience. I will talk to the volunteer team as well, see if we can work out where your emails have been bounced and see if we can get those back in enough. And I will also have a chat with the group chairs when we have our next meeting in September on this matter.
So really important question. Thank you so much for raising it. No, that's exactly what the AGM's for. Really appreciate it. Alison Gallagher, sorry, after you. Did you want to say anything else? Sorry.
She was just saying thank you.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
brilliant.
Thank you very much. Really, it's really appreciate all the efforts made. So thank you very much, everyone.
Great to connect with you. Alison Gallagher Hughes.
Thank you, Steve. Just wanted to kind of come back to Alastair in relation to the financial report. I mean, obviously the deficit isn't a huge amount, but many of the explanation around the deficit is around the risks and unpredictability of the market at the moment. So two-part question. One, what's happening with this year's finances? Is a similar amount going to be ring-fenced as a contingency plan? And secondly, given the fact that a significant income stream comes from training, and you have just said that the flexibility around how chartership is managed has actually encouraged more people to enter the chartered process. Is there any opportunity to review how we deliver training to make it more affordable and provide greater flexibility on how it's delivered?
Thanks, Alison. Alastair?
On the first point, do we have a contingency this year? No, we don't. So we are watching developments closely month by month, and we are ready if things change suddenly to make changes in our financial plans. Although I have to say, there was a lot of anxiety 8-9 months ago about cost of living crisis and how that might impact on us. And at the moment, it hasn't had a direct impact on us. It's obviously has an impact on some individual members and their circumstances, and they are being helped with by iProvision and other resources that we have. But we don't have a contingency in that sense. In terms of training, the training market at the moment is actually very buoyant. We have reverted to our pre-2019 practice not running face-to-face courses if there aren't a minimum of 8 people present, and that's helped us control our costs. In terms of delivering it in a way that makes it more affordable, that's one of the big investments that we've made over the last year in the on-demand learning platform. I mean, face-to-face learning, face-to-face training offered in London is not going to get cheaper. Online learning is a bit cheaper, but we still have to pay a trainer, we still have to pay staff to take the bookings and do all the other things. We still have to produce all the teaching materials, and anything that's produced on those terms just has a cost base that we have to meet. On-demand training is really a big opportunity for us, with people who would never be able to, or never want to travel into London, and don't particularly find the current online training very satisfactory. Be able to learn at their own time in their own way. And if you haven't looked at the on-demand learning platform yet, I encourage you to take a look. We will be adding more courses steadily year on year. We started off with EDI and ESG and crisis comms, and there'll be more going on there. So we will have more of a mix across live face-to-face, live online, and recorded on-demand learning.
Could I just come back on that one then, please, Alastair? I mean, I think there are a couple of points. I mean, I certainly applaud the on-demand, and certainly that makes it more affordable. As you say, in terms of individual members, the cost of living crisis is going to have an impact. But also, I ask about the idea around reviewing the whole of the sort of training strategy, primarily because, as you say, most of the kind of training is delivered in London, so that has an extra kind of cost for many members who not only have to attend the courses, but then obviously have to look at overnight accommodation in order to get there. Other models of classroom training delivery have been undertaken by other professional organisations, which has basically utilised the course, a course subject and content, and then rotated them around geographical centres over the course of a year. And that's something I would really like to see CIPR consider, so that we could perhaps look at where, who are we training, and if it doesn't provide a good geographical spread, then maybe that's something that we should be considering in the future.
I mean, I'll just say that before 2019, we made attempts every year to offer training face-to-face outside London. It did run in Glasgow, it did run in Newcastle. The Northwest ran sessions in Manchester, and there are probably a few others I can't now bring to mind. Some of those sessions did work, but on the whole, they were actually extremely expensive for the CIPR to deliver, because you just don't get the same numbers of people. So that they were additional work to organise, and they were less financially viable. So I'm very keen not to go back to that. I think that if there is a local demand for face-to-face training, then usually there is a national regional group that can pick that up if they want to. But the only face-to-face training that we can offer on sustainable financial terms is in London. But we now have live online and on demand to supplement that.
Thanks for your question, Alison. One last question. Sorry, we're running over, everyone. I hope the 5 minutes is okay. Gemma Petman.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to start with a thank you. I volunteer with the CIPR not-for-profit group, and certainly over the last couple of years, there's been seemingly quite a big investment in support for volunteers, which has been really welcomed. My question really is for Rachel around her priorities for volunteers during her year of being president. I think the, if you like, operational year of January to December can sometimes work against us groups when we're organising events and activities. As you said, Rachel, you kind of hope the work plan is available by the end of the year. Obviously, if it isn't, then we really struggle as groups to tie in with that and start pre-planning our events. So I suppose it's what your priorities are, how you're looking at supporting that volunteer activity across the organisation.
Hey, Gemma, thanks for your question and thank you for volunteering. As Steve mentioned, I've been chairing the group chairs community this year. What I've been doing with that group is trying to build strong relationships and really close some of the gaps that have been there between centrally run activities and things, and also what is then happening locally, and trying to do more crossover between the different groups. And that's, I think, really what we need to do in creating that strong community, and to just, and what Alastair was just talking about with doing training in different ways. I want us to be able to do stronger things together as communities and committees. The volunteers, we need volunteers. I've been a volunteer now for 10 years. I love what I do. I've had a fantastic time. It isn't always easy. There are frustrations when something suddenly crops up. But what we are trying to do, and what I'm really trying to do this year, and I will try and we'll keep going into next year, is to build in better, stronger communication channels. As you said, we've done the investment in the volunteer team and the membership team. So there are resources there that are helping smooth it through. We also, you may or not be aware, we have a coordinating committee that sort of sits over the groups and the panels and the networks, that looks at how we can align things as much as possible, not stopping anybody doing it, but how we can support and bring things together for greater impact and higher success rate factors. That's what we're trying to do. It's and one of the things I will add to that is that I'm not going to say it's difficult because of it, but I completely recognise we are all volunteers that are doing this stuff. And we have to take that into consideration when looking at people's time and commitment. We have to respect and appreciate what people put in, but we also we shouldn't be putting too much on people as well. So it's how we create that gentle balance, and that's something I am really keen to do and continuing for next year. Rachel was talking earlier about its people, and it really, really is. The Institute would be nothing without our volunteers, nothing without our staff, and nothing without our members. And so, and Gemma, if you think I'm failing in that next year, find me and slap me.
Don't find her, don't slap her, Gemma. There's no need for that. But as Rachel said, it's actually a change this year, Gemma. So normally I would be chairing group chairs, but what I felt was, my experience was that there was enough connection between, and this is no disrespect to Rachel Roberts, who was a fantastic kind of link with me, but there was enough connection between me and group chairs last year, if you like, when I was planning for this year. So I changed that. I asked Rachel to chair group chairs this year. So in terms of building the work plan, she knows what the group chairs are doing. There's a lot more organic connection. We will have a work plan before the end of the year. By the time you have your AGMs in September, we will have that ready for you. We've got the outline for it now. So rest assured, you should be. Everyone is working towards you guys being able to launch your events from 1st of January. Don't literally do that. I won't be there, but yeah, soon in January. Yeah.
Great, thanks everybody. As I say, it is a thank you because it has massively improved and come on leaps and bounds in the last few years. And it feels like everything's moving in the right direction. I just think there's a real appetite amongst volunteers to align with what, if you like, HQ is doing. Keep a little bit of flexibility around what we know our sister groups or our geographic audiences are looking for, and it's just bringing those two things together.
Good, thank you, Gemma, for your question. Much appreciated. Just before I do the closing stuff. I should have mentioned when Alison was asking about training costs that we've just launched, and it's something I'm extremely proud of, extremely grateful to iProvision for. We just launched what we call the iProvision 75 Fund, and that is so iProvision, as many of you will know, if not all, that iProvision is our benevolent fund. What they've traditionally been able to do is be a safety net for CIPR members who've fallen on hard times. But for the first time this year, they've launched a new fund that can proactively help members from poorer financial backgrounds or minority backgrounds to advance their careers. So if you have genuine financial hardship, you are looking to do training and you can't afford that, please do have a look at the CIPR Vision 75 funds. That's a real opportunity to use that to defray training costs in London or elsewhere. So, and that's open to all our CIPR members from day one, so students as well. It's a real opportunity. We really want to help that to develop social mobility within our industry as well, and help some people to get ahead and help talent thrive. So there you go. That's my my pitch for that. And well done to Amy Postle, Kevin Taylor, and others who've really driven that, and they should be absolutely proud. That's one of the best things I've seen CIPR launch in my over 20 years of membership. I'm just privileged that that's happened in my year, actually, I have to say. Right, just to finish, some very quick statements to finish. Thanks everyone for joining us today, and particularly Ava for running the AGM so smoothly. It's gone really well. It's a fascinating session and great to hear from Jon Ronson, but also Rachel, Alastair and Rachel. I think everyone's been really good today. If you've got any questions not asked today, I'm very happy to engage with members and learners by email at present@cipr.co.uk or on LinkedIn, Twitter or Threads. Many of you know me. You know that I'm happy to discuss CIPR any time of any day. So just reach out. And I know Rachel Roberts and Rachel Clamp are the same as Alastair. So you know, please don't hide your light under a bush. If you've got questions, we want to keep improving. CIPR have got some great activities coming up after the summer, so please do keep an eye out for our One CIPR Group drinks events in your region. We've got the Fellows and Charter Petitioners lunch at the House of Lords on 29th of September. There's going to be a brilliant speaker for that, which we're just finalising. There's the Maggie lecture, which I mentioned before. That's going to be online for our international members and anyone else who wants to go on the 4th of October. Again, I'm not going to reveal the speaker here because it's not my right to, but we've got what I think is one of the best speakers we've ever had for CIPR going to that on 4th of October. So keep an eye out for that. That'll be announced very soon. And then finally, the Future Leadership Conference, which I'm leading on the 14th of November, which again, we've got some really, really big, exciting news for. And I think that's going to be great. We really wanted to have a younger audience there, to really look to the future of this industry and challenge us all around the way where PR is going to go over the next 10 years at that event. So that's going to be really exciting into the year. So finally, you've heard from 3 presidents today, but much like Doctor Who, we keep regenerating. So if you fancy being president number 77, we've posted the details of how to apply just before this meeting. I know that both Rachel's and I, as well as all the other former presidents that were on this call, will be happy to speak to anyone about the role and what it entails. I have to say, from a personal perspective, it's been challenging. It's been a real opportunity for personal and professional growth. But I've also got to do some amazing things this year, which I wouldn't have got to do otherwise. You know, I've spoken at the House of Commons, which is a lifelong dream. I've swum in Lake Bled and spoken to international practitioners. I'm hopefully going to go to Egypt before the end of the year. I've got to do this and speak to one of my favourite authors, which is a real, as you probably can tell, a real fanboy moment for me. And I'm so looking forward to the Future Leadership Conference at the end of the year, which I think is going to be a really brilliant end to my CIPR year. So, you know, if you've got the capacity, if you've got the desire, it's a really good thing to do. So please do think about it very seriously. It's a great job. So I'd like to see you at that or any of the other events. Please enjoy the summer wherever you are, whether you're in Switzerland or somewhere less exotic like Hertfordshire. Rachel, always with a glass of champagne on hand, like a good PR practitioner should. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming and for staying this long. I'm really sorry I ran over, but I hope you found that a really useful session over the last couple of hours. So thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful evening and a wonderful summer, and I will see you, if not before, in September. Take care. Speak soon. Bye-bye.